For 8 years, I thought I married the love of my life. My name is Aaron. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I genuinely believed I had everything I'd ever wanted: a good job, a modest but cozy home, and a wife who felt like my best friend. We laughed a lot. We traveled across Europe, took hundreds of photos in places like Santorini and Bruges, always holding hands like we were in some kind of travel magazine. We had a quiet little garden in the back of our home with string lights that I strung up myself. We'd sit out there on summer nights sipping wine, sharing stories, dreaming out loud about the future. Kids, a cabin by a lake, maybe adopting a dog. You know, the normal dream. I was the guy who brought her coffee in bed every Saturday morning. The kind who remembered anniversaries without needing a reminder. She used to tease me for how neatly I folded the laundry or how I'd hum old 90s songs while vacuuming. Life was peaceful, predictable, even, but there was comfort in that. Until the night I opened her laptop. But before I get there, you need to know more about how things really were behind the scenes. Because, like most stories that end in fire, this one started with a slow leak of gas. And in hindsight, the warning signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. Or maybe I trusted too much. Maybe I was too proud to admit that something had changed. Her name's Emily. We met when I was 24 and she was 22. She was spontaneous, funny, effortlessly charming. We met at a friend's bonfire party, one of those cold October nights when everyone's bundled up and there's cheap beer and someone's acoustic guitar fighting against the wind. She stole my hoodie that night, and I never got it back. I didn't mind. That was kind of her thing. She made a habit of borrowing little pieces of me, hoodies, my Spotify playlists, even phrases I used, and turning them into hers. I thought it was cute at first. Endearing. Now I wonder if that should have scared me more than it did. Emily came from a very tight-knit family. And by tight-knit, I don't mean close in the warm and fuzzy way. I mean enmeshed. Her mother, Diane, had this kind of overbearing energy that filled every room she walked into. One of those moms who always meant well, but had opinions on everything from how you arranged your kitchen to how you should live your life. I remember once, early in our relationship, Emily's parents came to visit, and Diane took it upon herself to rearrange the spice rack in our kitchen because it made more sense alphabetically. I laughed it off then. I even thanked her. Big mistake. Diane always had this subtle way of asserting control. She'd constantly make little jabs, like calling our one-bedroom place quaint or commenting on how Emily had really settled into a simpler life. She'd say things like, "Emily used to dream bigger, remember?" in front of me, like I was a placeholder for something better that never showed up. Emily would always brush it off with a laugh and "That's just mom," but I could see something behind her eyes, something like guilt or shame or maybe just exhaustion. And yet, Diane was always around, always calling, always stopping by, unannounced with Tupperware full of lasagna and unsolicited life advice. And Emily, she always let her in, even when I said I needed space, even when I asked her to draw a boundary. She'd just say, "That's how my family is. You'll get used to it." I never did. Her dad, James, was quieter, worn down, a man who seemed to live under the shadow of his wife's personality. He'd nod along, chuckle awkwardly, but rarely speak. When I asked Emily about it once, she just said, "He's learned not to fight her." That stuck with me. Anyway, for the first few years, I let it go. I figured families were complicated, and besides, Emily made me happy. That had to count for something, right? Then there was her brother, Evan. Oh boy, Evan was the golden child. The kind who could do no wrong even when he did everything wrong. He'd borrow money from their parents, crash at their house for months at a time, and somehow still be treated like royalty. At our wedding, he gave a toast that started with, "I never thought Emily would get married before me," and ended with, "I give it 5 years tops." Everyone laughed. I didn't. But Emily just rolled her eyes, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Ignore him. He's a moron." And I did. Over time, though, Evan became a fixture in our life. He'd show up uninvited, sometimes needing a place to stay just for a few days that turned into weeks. He never paid for anything. He'd raid the fridge, leave dirty dishes everywhere, and then disappear again like a raccoon in the night. I started putting my foot down, telling Emily I wasn't comfortable with it. She'd nod, agree, and then let him back in the next time he texted, "Sis, I'm in a tight spot." I should have seen it coming, right? But I was in love, and I believed in her, believed that we were building something solid. So I kept making excuses for her family, for the emotional distance that crept in over the years, for how she started spending more time at work and less time with me. It was subtle at first. She started working later hours, saying her new manager at the firm was demanding and kept moving deadlines. I didn't question it. I mean, I work too. I run my own small business from home designing outdoor living spaces. I knew how projects could pile up. But then there were the weekend team-building retreats, the business trips that always seemed to come up last minute, the sudden need for a second phone just for work stuff. I remember once I asked her, "Do you even like your job anymore?" And she said, "No one likes their job, Aaron. We do it because we have to." But there was something in her tone, detached, distant, that made me pause. That feeling only grew. One night, about 13 months ago, she came home from one of those trips looking different. Not guilty exactly, but cautious. She was unusually quiet, barely touched her dinner, and when I asked how the trip went, she said, "It was fine, just exhausting." I asked her if something happened. She shrugged and said, "Not everything is a thing, Aaron." She went upstairs and took a long shower. Her phone never left her side that night. I remember thinking, okay, something's off. Still, I didn't dig. I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid husband checking browser histories and playing detective in his own marriage. I wanted to trust her. I told myself, if something was really wrong, she'd tell me. But people don't always tell you when they stop loving you. And sometimes, they don't stop loving you. They just love someone else more. The first real crack, the one I couldn't ignore, came 6 weeks ago at a family dinner. Diane had invited us over for Sunday roast, the kind where the whole family's there, pretending everything is picture perfect while passive-aggressively digging knives into each other's backs. Emily had been quiet all day. Not cold, just absent. And then, right in the middle of dinner, Diane says, with that smug little grin she always wore when she was about to say something inappropriate, "So, are you finally going to tell Aaron about the promotion?" I looked at her. Promotion? Emily's face froze for a second too long. Then she smiled, too quickly, and said, "Oh, yeah, I was going to tell you later. It's not official yet." Diane laughed. "Oh, come on. Don't play coy. You already signed the papers." The room got quiet. I stared at her, fork halfway to my mouth. "You signed a new contract?" "When?" Emily looked down at her plate. "Last week. It's just a lateral move. Nothing big." Diane chimed in again. "Well, it's more hours, more travel, but much better connections. And her new manager, what's his name again? Nathan? He's just so impressed with her." Evan let out a low chuckle. "Is that the guy from the retreat photos? The one with the man bun?" My stomach tightened. Emily snapped, "Shut up, Evan." But it was already too late. I felt something shift that night, like a thread snapping in the back of my mind. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the look she gave me. Like I was the one being difficult for having a reaction at all. That was the night I decided to check her laptop. She was asleep upstairs. I sat on the living room couch with her MacBook on my lap. It was password protected, but I knew her password. She hadn't changed it in years. Same one she used for Netflix. And then I saw it. A folder on her desktop named Work. Inside were subfolders by month. And inside the most recent one messages. Screenshots. Emails. DMs. Photos. 13 months of messages with a man named Nathan. Her manager. The same one from the retreat photos. The one Diane seemed to know by name. And at the very top of the thread, a message from just 2 days ago. A selfie of the two of them in what looked like a hotel room. She was wearing a robe. He had his arm around her. The caption read, "Wish we didn't have to sneak around like this." I sat there frozen for a long time. When I finally went upstairs and woke her up, I didn't say anything. I just showed her the screen. She blinked at it, rubbed her eyes, then looked at me and said, "Aaron, it's not what you think." And that was the moment my world fell apart. But that wasn't the end of it. That was just the beginning. She said, "It's not what you think." It was 2:17 in the morning, and I was standing there at the foot of our bed, clutching her laptop in both hands, trying not to scream. My mouth had gone dry. I felt my pulse in my throat. I handed it to her. Just handed it over like I was offering a glass of water. And she looked at the screen, then at me, and had the audacity to say that. "It's not what you think." No panic. No tears. Just calm. Calculated. Like she'd been rehearsing that line. I didn't even know what to say back. I just stared. Waiting. Daring her to continue. And she did. She sighed and sat up straighter in bed, brushing her hair back from her face like she'd been interrupted from a nap. I should have told you, she said. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because something inside me cracked wide open, and laughter was all that leaked out. Hurt me? I said. Emily, you lied to me for over a year. She winced like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. It started as a friendship. Spare me. I was lonely, Aaron. There it was. That phrase that gets tossed out like a get-out-of-jail-free card. I was lonely. As if that explains everything. As if that makes 13 months of secret photos and hotel rooms somehow understandable. She started crying then. Soft little sobs that felt more like a performance than a breakdown. I had seen her truly cry before, like when her grandfather passed, or the time we lost our first pregnancy. This wasn't that. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. I didn't plan it. I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching the person I thought I knew unravel into someone I didn't recognize. I need time to think, I finally said. Think about what? I don't know yet. I turned and left the room. Spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, she made coffee like nothing had happened. She even offered me a cup. I didn't take it. For 3 days, we lived in silence. She stayed in the guest room. I kept to myself. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I needed time to process, to understand the scale of the betrayal. And that's when things really started to spiral. Because Emily, she didn't apologize again. She didn't beg. She didn't seem remorseful. If anything, she became colder, almost resentful of me for finding out, as if I had violated her trust. And then, to make matters worse, Diane showed up. She just arrived one afternoon. No warning. I heard the doorbell, opened it, and there she was with that smug little purse-lipped smile. Where's my daughter? She asked, brushing past me before I could answer. I closed the door and followed her into the living room. Emily came down the stairs wearing sweatpants and a blank expression. You didn't tell me you were coming, Emily said. I figured you could use some support, Diane replied, shooting a look at me like I was the one who had cheated. I didn't speak, just walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, trying to stay calm. But then I heard Diane's voice again, lower this time, but still audible. Honestly, sweetie, I never thought he was the right match for you. You lost yourself in this housewife routine. My grip on the glass tightened. I'm not a housewife, Emily mumbled. Well, whatever you are, it's time you remembered who you used to be. I walked out and looked them both in the eye. Are you serious right now? I asked Diane. Your daughter cheated on me, and you're here to give her a pep talk? Diane didn't flinch. Don't be dramatic, Aaron. Marriage is complicated. 13 months, I said. They've been sneaking around for over a year. That's not a mistake. That's a double life. She raised an eyebrow. Maybe if you'd been more attentive. Get out. She blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of my house. Emily stood up. Aaron. No. This is my home too. And I will not be disrespected in it. Diane scoffed, but grabbed her purse. You're making a mistake. I opened the door and didn't say another word. She walked out. Emily didn't follow her. Just stood there, arms crossed, eyes blank. That night, she didn't come home. Said she needed space and went to stay with a friend. I didn't ask who. I already knew. The following week, the real breakdown started. I told my brother, Caleb, what happened. Caleb and I have always been close. He's younger by 2 years, but far more cynical. He listened quietly as I laid it all out. When I was done, he said, you need to protect yourself. She's not done hurting you. I thought he was being paranoid. I was wrong. A few days later, I got a call from our joint bank. There had been a large transfer, $9,000, from our shared savings account to a new checking account under Emily's name. I froze. I hadn't authorized anything. Neither of us had touched that account in over a year. It was meant to be for a down payment on a cabin we dreamed about. Now it was nearly drained. I called her. She didn't answer. So I drove to Diane's. Emily answered the door. You stole from me, I said. It's not stealing. It's our money. No, you don't get to cheat and then drain our savings. I needed it for legal consultations. I stared at her. Legal consultations for what? She crossed her arms. You think I'm just going to walk away from this marriage with nothing? I laughed again. That hollow kind of laugh that sounds like it's echoing from a dark well. I've paid every bill for the last 8 years, I said. You wanted to quit your job in 2021, and I said go for it. I supported you through that. I built this house. I paid off your student loans. You don't make this about money. You made it about money. That was the last time we spoke civilly. Over the next few weeks, things turned into a slow-motion train wreck. Emily moved out into a condo I later learned Nathan was leasing for her. I stopped asking questions. I started seeing a lawyer. Caleb helped me file to freeze the remaining joint assets. But the hits kept coming. Diane began spreading stories. At church, in their neighborhood, to anyone who'd listen, that I had emotionally neglected Emily, that I had made her feel unwanted, that this separation was mutual. She even hinted I'd been controlling, whatever that means. And Evan? Oh, Evan started popping up in my life like a cockroach. One day I came home and found him in my garage, trying to take my power tools. These were a gift from Dad, he said. Are you high? I bought these last year. He said I could have them. I threatened to call the cops. He left, cursing under his breath. But that wasn't the betrayal that broke me. No, that came from someone I never expected, James. One quiet Sunday morning, James called me. He rarely called anyone, so I picked up immediately. Hey, Aaron, he said, voice low. Can we meet? Sure. Everything okay? No, but I need to tell you something. We met at a diner on the edge of town. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. We sat in a booth, and he stirred his coffee like it was the only thing tethering him to the moment. What I'm about to say might cost me everything, he said. But I can't stay silent anymore. I waited. I found out Emily and Diane have been planning this for a while. The affair, the bank transfers, the smear campaign. It's not just Nathan. I blinked. What do you mean? She wants the house, he said. Diane told her to leave you. Wait a few months, and then push for sole ownership. They think you won't fight. They're counting on you being the good guy. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I watched Diane destroy my life. I let it happen. I was too weak to fight back. But you still have a chance. That conversation changed everything. Because now it wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. It was war. And I had been sleeping with the enemy. I walked out of that diner with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Caleb picked me up an hour later. We sat in his truck outside my house, and I told him everything James had said. His jaw tightened. We need a plan, he said. And I nodded. Because this wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about taking back control. But before I could even begin, one more blow came. And this one shattered everything. A letter, delivered by courier, from Emily's lawyer, demanding full ownership of the house, citing emotional distress, and, get this, a spousal support claim for $1,200 a month. It was the final slap in the face. I read it 3 times, hands shaking. She didn't just cheat. She didn't just lie. She wanted to take everything. And in that moment, sitting at my kitchen table with that letter in my hand, I made a silent promise to myself. You want war, Emily? You're about to see just how cold I can be when you take away everything I love. But I'll get to that. Because what happened next? You won't believe what they tried. The day I received the letter from Emily's lawyer was the day something in me shut off, and something else turned on. I didn't yell. I didn't rage. I didn't even call her to ask what the hell she was thinking. I just folded the letter back into the envelope, slid it into the kitchen drawer where we used to keep wedding invitations and birthday cards, and sat in silence for a long time. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Not suffocating. Just quiet. Like the end of a storm. The kind where the sky looks bruised, but you're still standing. Up to that point, I'd been living in the wreckage, emotionally limping through each day, walking on eggshells in my own mind. Some days I couldn't eat. Some days I couldn't sleep. I'd pick up a mug from the cabinet and remember the morning I bought it for her at that little cafe in Asheville. I'd pass by the shelf where we kept our travel books and catch myself staring at the spine of Italy in 10 days, remembering how she cried when we saw the Duomo in Florence. Remembering how I kissed her under the stars and whispered, I'll never leave you. I used to believe that meant something. But when someone you love breaks you like that, systematically, slowly, piece by piece, there comes a moment where grief and humiliation fuse into something else. Resolve. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. So I started with what I could control. The house, once so full of her presence, had to be stripped down to its bones. I boxed up everything that was hers. Photos, clothes, books, old gifts, keepsakes from trips, and shoved them into the garage. I took down the gallery wall she had curated with such pride. I even replaced the couch because I couldn't look at the stain on the cushion without remembering the night She spilled red wine while laughing at a dumb movie we both pretended to like. I painted the living room, took down the floral curtains she loved, bought new plates, got rid of the dried eucalyptus in the vase by the window because she used to say it made her feel calm, and I didn't want her calm in my house anymore. It felt strange, purging your life like that, but it also felt clean, like reclaiming something I didn't realize had been stolen long ago. The nights were the hardest. It wasn't just the silence. It was the doubt. I kept replaying conversations in my head, wondering which moments had been lies. Did she mean it when she said she loved me that morning in Prague? Was she already messaging Nathan when she held my hand in the airport? When she bought me that leather wallet last Christmas? Was that guilt or love? I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Marissa. She was blunt, sharp as a tack, and didn't let me wallow. At our second session, she said, "You're not broken. You're wounded. There's a difference." That stuck with me. I began writing again. Just journal entries at first. Pages and pages of raw, unfiltered thoughts. Then one night, I opened my design software, not for a client, but for myself. I started sketching what I would do to the backyard if I could do anything. I redesigned the patio. I created a pergola with a suspended swing. I added a water feature, something small, but peaceful. The next week, I bought lumber. Caleb came by the next Saturday with a six-pack and no questions. He just nodded at the sketches and said, "Let's get to work." We spent every weekend building it from scratch. It was hard work, the kind that blisters your hands and soaks your shirt. But it felt good. It felt real. I hadn't felt that way in months. One afternoon, after hours of hammering and sawing, Caleb and I sat on the half-finished swing and cracked open 2 cold beers. He looked at me and said, "You know, you're starting to look like yourself again." I didn't answer, but I smiled. Around that same time, I started landing more clients. I'd been freelancing for years, outdoor designs, backyard transformations, high-end garden layouts, but I'd always kept it small. Safe. Emily once said, "You're good, but you don't have that killer instinct." Funny how those words echo differently when you find out the person who said them was quietly killing your future behind your back. But something shifted. I started saying yes to bigger projects, pitched with more confidence, reached out to former clients for referrals, even started posting before and after shots on social media. The response was overwhelming. In less than 2 months, I had a waiting list. A local home improvement magazine reached out asking if they could feature my work. One of my clients offered to introduce me to a developer looking to overhaul an entire set of high-end rental properties. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Of course, Emily noticed. She started showing up in small ways. Texts that read, "Hope you're doing okay," or "I saw your backyard on Instagram. It looks amazing." I didn't reply. Then one night, I got an email from her. Subject line, "Can we talk?" The message was short. "I know you hate me. I don't blame you. But I've been thinking a lot about everything. I just want to understand how we got here. Please, can we meet?" I stared at it for a long time. Marissa once told me, sometimes closure is just another word for control. I didn't respond. A week later, Diane called. Yes, Diane. She left a voicemail that I still have saved, mostly because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Aaron, this is Diane. I'm calling because, well, I know things have been tense. But I just want you to know that I never wanted things to get ugly. I still care about you. You were like a son to me. I hope we can all find a way to heal and move forward. For Emily's sake." I played it twice. Then again, just to make sure I hadn't hallucinated it. Caleb said I should burn the audio to a CD and mail it back to her with a glitter bomb. I was tempted. But what really twisted the knife was the next part of the plan. Emily and her lawyer had filed an amended claim, not just for the house and spousal support, but now citing emotional damages from a hostile post-separation environment. They claimed my refusal to respond to her messages was emotionally manipulative. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. This woman cheated, lied, stole from our shared savings, and plotted with her mother to push me out of the home I built. And my silence was the crime? My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Judith, practically rolled her eyes as she slid the papers across the table. "They're trying to rattle you," she said. "They're used to you folding." "Not anymore," I said. She smiled. "Good, because now it's our turn." What followed was weeks of prep. Judith had me compile everything: texts, emails, timelines, receipts. Caleb helped me dig up documentation of every major purchase I made on the house. I tracked bank transfers. I gathered character references from former clients and even James, who agreed to write a statement supporting me. And slowly, brick by brick, I started building my case. But while the legal battle brewed behind the scenes, something else was happening, something more important. I was finding me again. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. Went hiking with a buddy I hadn't spoken to since college. Even joined a local community garden project where I met people who didn't know me as Emily's husband. They just knew me as Aaron, the guy who designed that gorgeous patio in Willow Creek. One evening, after a long day of planting, a woman named Harper, smart, kind, with this laugh that made everyone smile, asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I almost said no. My heart wasn't ready. But something in me whispered, why not? We talked for 3 hours. We didn't talk about love, or relationships, or exes. We talked about books and music and the weird quirks of living in a small town. She told me about how she used to be a teacher but left to pursue urban farming. I told her about the time I accidentally installed a koi pond too close to a fire pit and had to rescue 3 fish during a barbecue. It felt easy, natural, human. We've grabbed coffee a few more times since then. Nothing serious. Just 2 people enjoying each other's company without pressure or pain. And I realized something. I am more than what she did to me. I am more than the betrayal, the lies, the gaslighting, the cold silences, the carefully crafted manipulations from a woman who said she loved me while planning my replacement. I am still me. And that was the rise. But I'd be lying if I said everything was behind me. Because just when I thought the worst was over, just when I was finally breathing again, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a photograph. A single photo of Emily and Nathan, candid, taken from a distance, standing outside a lawyer's office. On the back, written in sharp black ink, you have no idea what she's still hiding. No signature. No explanation. Just that. And just like that, the game changed again. When I turned the photo over and read those words, you have no idea what she's still hiding, my first instinct was to think it was a prank. A sick one, sure, but not impossible. People do weird things when they're bored, and gossip travels fast in small towns. Maybe someone knew about the divorce, about the affair, and decided to mess with me. But then I took a closer look at the photograph. It wasn't printed on some standard at-home inkjet. It was matte, developed professionally, cleanly cut. The kind of photo you'd get from someone who knew what they were doing. It showed Emily and Nathan outside a brick office building. She was facing him, sunglasses perched on top of her head, a manila envelope in her hand. He looked tense. She looked smug, like she had just won something. The address number on the building behind them was partially visible, 38-5. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I opened Google Maps and started looking for any office building with a matching address near our county. 10 minutes later, I found it. A private law firm. One that specialized in asset protection, business litigation, and, get this, offshore accounts. The pieces started falling into place. Emily had drained nearly $9,000 from our joint savings and said it was for legal consultations. I had assumed it went to her divorce lawyer. But what if it didn't? What if there was more going on behind the curtain? The betrayal had been bad enough. But the possibility that she was hiding something even bigger, possibly financial fraud? Or trying to stash money in a place I couldn't trace it during the divorce proceedings. That snapped me out of any lingering softness I had for her. I scanned the photo again. The angle wasn't ground level. It looked like it was taken from a second-story window across the street, just enough distance to remain unnoticed. So someone had been watching them. But who? I flipped the envelope inside out looking for fingerprints, initials, anything. Nothing. So I did the next logical thing. I went to the building. I told myself I was just going to confirm what business operated out of Suite 385. But part of me hoped someone would recognize them. Maybe I'd get lucky and catch Nathan's name on a visitor log. Maybe even find the lawyer they'd met with. I dressed clean, button-up shirt, no ball cap, no hoodie, just a calm, professional guy looking for legal services. When I stepped into the lobby, a young receptionist behind the counter smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "Hi," I said, giving my best polite citizen voice. "I'm looking for someone I spoke with over the phone last week. His name was Daniel. I think he's in Suite 385. She blinked. "We don't have anyone by that name here." "Oh, Sorry, I may have gotten the suite number wrong. I looked around, pretending to search. Is 385 upstairs? She nodded. Second floor. But that suite belongs to a private financial consultant. He doesn't take walk-ins. My ears perked up. Oh, what's his name? She hesitated. I'm not sure I can give that out. I smiled. Of course. Totally understand. I left 10 minutes later, but not before checking the building directory in the hallway. Suite 385 was labeled only as G. Sinclair, Private Consulting. I didn't recognize the name. Neither did Caleb when I told him later that night. But Judith, my lawyer, did. She leaned back in her chair, narrowed her eyes, and said, Gregory Sinclair? Yeah, he's a fixer. A paper cleaner. People go to him when they want to hide money or shuffle assets before a divorce. I've run into his name twice before. Both times, my clients got screwed. That sealed it. Emily wasn't just cheating and scheming. She was laundering money, or preparing to, trying to hide assets so she could walk away with more than she deserved. Maybe even more than she legally could claim. Judith leaned forward, her voice serious. If she's using Sinclair, she's playing dirty. You need to be ready to hit back. I looked her in the eye. Then let's go to war. That night, I sat in my backyard under the newly built pergola, staring up at the stars through the slats of what I'd carved with my own hands. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. The next few weeks became a flurry of strategy. I didn't just want to win. I wanted to outmaneuver her. Not out of spite. Though let's be honest, there was plenty of that. But because I couldn't let her walk away thinking she had outsmarted me. Because she hadn't. Not anymore. Judith and I combed through every financial record. We traced the $9,000 withdrawal through the bank logs, found where it landed, an account in her name under a new online bank I'd never even heard of. We filed an emergency motion to freeze the funds pending review of potential concealment. Judith drafted a formal inquiry to Sinclair's office. We didn't expect a response, but it was enough to raise red flags. Meanwhile, I started gathering allies. James, quietly but firmly, agreed to speak on my behalf again, this time more directly. He wrote a notarized statement describing multiple conversations where Diane had encouraged Emily to get what she could from the divorce, even suggesting Emily weaponize the affair if needed. Yes, you read that right. Weaponize the affair. Caleb got involved too. He began documenting everything he remembered about Evan's behavior at the house, how often he stayed, what property he tried to take, and even how he once joked about the house being technically family property since Emily's name was on the title. Spoiler, it wasn't. We started compiling character statements. Mutual friends reached out, people I hadn't spoken to in months, who said Emily had been rewriting history, saying we'd been on the rocks for years, that I'd checked out emotionally, that I'd forced her into a lifestyle she never wanted. One of them forwarded me screenshots from her group chat, messages where she described the affair as a necessary evolution and called Nathan her upgrade. That stung. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But I saved those messages. They were going to be very useful. Then came the opportunity one didn't expect. A week before our next court date, I received a tip, anonymous, just like the photo. This time, it was an email. Short and simple. Check the condo. Mailbox 4. Friday, 8 p.m. Come alone. Now, under normal circumstances, I'd delete a message like that. It read like the start of a low-budget spy movie. But something told me this wasn't random. Someone had been watching. Someone had an agenda. So I went. I parked a block away from the condo where Emily was staying, the one Nathan supposedly leased for her. I walked the perimeter until I found the mailbox cluster. Number 4 was second from the top. I slipped on a pair of gloves. I wasn't breaking in. I was collecting my own mail. Sort of. Inside was a small brown envelope. No markings. I pocketed it and left. Back home, I opened it. Inside were printed emails. Between Emily and Nathan. Pages of them. Plans. Instructions. Mentions of Sinclair. Details of when and how to transfer money. One thread stood out. Nathan, he won't see it coming. He's too soft. Emily, he was. Not anymore. That's why we need to move now. And then, the smoking gun. Emily, if things go south, I'll claim emotional abuse. His silence speaks for itself. I sat very still after reading that. She had planned every move, every accusation, every calculated manipulation. It wasn't just betrayal. It was sabotage. And now, I had proof. Judith's reaction the next morning was immediate. "We're going to bury them." I nodded. "Good." She set everything in motion: formal submissions, evidence logging, statements from character witnesses. We didn't tip our hand all at once. We waited. Let them think they still held the high ground. But we had one more card to play. Caleb had a friend, Riley, who ran a private investigation firm. We hired him discreetly to dig into Nathan. What came back shocked even me. Nathan wasn't just Emily's manager. He was a co-founder of a side business in Emily's name, filed 2 months before the affair began. A small consulting firm that, on paper, looked legitimate, but it had never had a client, never generated income. It was a shell, likely created to siphon money Emily planned to claim during the divorce as a shared investment. They had planned to use my savings to fund it, so when the dust settled, they could claim it as hers. I felt sick, but I also felt ready. We weren't just going to fight back. We were going to flip the entire board. Because with every dirty trick they had used, every lie, every manipulation, every gaslighting word she fed me, I was no longer angry. I was sharp, and I was watching her every move now. Because the next court hearing, that was when everything would change. And believe me, she didn't see it coming. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before the sun. I brewed coffee, but I didn't drink it. Just watched the steam curl above the mug while the world outside stayed dark. The air was still, heavy with that pre-storm kind of silence. It felt appropriate. This wasn't just another court appearance. It wasn't about paperwork or mediation or haggling over furniture. This was the culmination. The moment everything I'd endured, every sleepless night, every manipulation, every lie, was about to shift in my favor. I'd rehearsed it all in my head 100 times. What I hadn't accounted for was how calm I'd feel walking into the courthouse. Emily arrived 15 minutes late. She wore a charcoal pantsuit, hair pinned up, expression perfectly neutral like she'd walked off a law firm's website. Diane was with her, dressed like a grieving widow attending a funeral she was pretending not to enjoy. Nathan didn't show. Of course he didn't. That would have made things too obvious. They didn't look at me as they passed. But I noticed something. Emily looked thinner. Not physically, weaker. The cool confidence she once wore like a perfume was cracking around the edges. Her jaw was tense, hands twitching slightly at her sides. Maybe she sensed what was coming. Maybe deep down, she knew. We took our seats. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Alvarez, entered. She'd handled the initial filings months ago, and from the first gavel strike, it was clear she was done with the theatrics. "Let's get this resolved today," she said flatly. "Both parties have submitted supplemental documentation. I'll be reviewing key exhibits." Emily's attorney, a smug guy in a too-tight tie named Graham, started with his usual opening. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to emotional neglect and abandonment. She sacrificed years of her career in support of the marriage, and we believe she's entitled to the marital home, spousal support, and compensation for her contributions." Judith stood up. "Objection. That narrative is both inaccurate and unsupported by evidence. We have provided documentation of financial independence, proof of sustained infidelity, and a pattern of calculated deception intended to defraud my client of shared assets." Judge Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "You may proceed, Ms. Klein." Judith clicked a remote, and the monitor screen lit up. Page 1, a bank statement showing the $9,000 withdrawal. Page 2, the new account it was funneled into. Page 3, a text message from Emily to Nathan, referencing the transfer and a meeting with Sinclair. From there, the exhibit grew teeth. Judith presented the timeline, the emails, the registered shell company. She read from the anonymous printouts and backed them with legitimate filings of the business in Emily's name. When Graham objected, citing chain of custody and hearsay, Judith calmly smiled and slid across the official registry documents, all sourced publicly. Then came the clincher. "We also have a witness affidavit from James Hollis, father of the defendant, stating that Emily and her mother openly discussed strategies to manipulate this court by presenting false emotional abuse claims and hiding assets." Graham's jaw clenched. Emily turned in her seat slightly, glancing toward her mother. Diane stared straight ahead. And then Judith dropped the final card. "Your Honor, we believe this was a premeditated attempt at financial manipulation with documented evidence of fraud. We are not simply asking that spousal support be denied. We are requesting a formal investigation into asset concealment, and we will be pursuing restitution. The silence that followed felt physical. The judge didn't speak for a full minute. When she did, her voice was like a hammer. "Ms. Hollis," she said, looking straight at Emily. "Do you have anything to say?" Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. Diane leaned in and whispered something, but Judge Alvarez raised her hand. "I didn't ask your mother." Emily swallowed. I didn't know he had all that." Wrong answer. The judge's expression turned ice cold. "So it's accurate?" Emily blinked. "We didn't go through with it. Nothing was hidden. It was just a consultation." Judith stood again. "We have an email, Your Honor, in which she states, quote, 'Let's move the money before he catches on.'" The judge held up a hand. "Enough." She turned back to her clerk. "I'm issuing a motion to freeze all accounts associated with the Shell business, and I'm authorizing an audit of any transfers initiated by Ms. Hollis in the last 12 months. Then she turned to Emily. "Due to the pattern of deceit and the clear intention to defraud, the court is ruling in favor of Mr. Landon. Full ownership of the marital property will be transferred to the plaintiff. No spousal support will be awarded." Graham tried to object. "Mr. Graham, if you interrupt again, I'll hold you in contempt." He sat down. Judge Alvarez wasn't done. "This is one of the most egregious attempts at asset concealment I've seen in 5 years. Consider this a warning, Ms. Hollis. I'm referring this to the district attorney's office for further investigation. If charges are filed, that's out of my hands." The gavel struck. And just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, I exhaled. Long and slow. Judith clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good." I nodded. "You too." Emily and Diane brushed past me. For the first time, Emily looked me in the eye. There was no fury, no smugness, just defeat. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She knew. The fallout came quickly. 3 days later, Sinclair's office was formally subpoenaed. Nathan resigned from his firm the following week. Whether by choice or pressure, no one knows. Rumors swirled that he was under internal investigation. No charges stuck, but his reputation was torched. The Shell business was dissolved within a month. The frozen funds, what was left of them, were returned to my account under court order. Diane tried to run PR damage control. I heard through the grapevine she told people I'd hacked Emily's accounts. She even hinted I had blackmail material. But no one believed her. Too many people had seen the receipts. Too many knew the truth. James called me 2 weeks later. "Just wanted to say," he said, "you handled it better than I ever could have." "I wouldn't have if it weren't for you." He chuckled. "Still, you didn't just get justice. You got your piece." And he was right. Because the house, it was mine now. Every room, every corner, every memory was no longer tinged with bitterness. I repainted the bedroom, took down the old fixtures, turned the guest room into a workshop, built a new fire pit in the backyard, and hosted Caleb and some friends for a barbecue. We drank. We laughed. We toasted to moving on. Harper was there too. She brought lemon bars. She stayed late. We sat on the swing under the pergola I had built with my own hands, and she looked at me and said, "You know, you don't look like a guy who just went through a divorce." And for the first time, I could honestly say, that's because I didn't lose. Months passed. I never heard from Emily again. Not directly, anyway. One of her old friends messaged me on Facebook. Said she'd moved to another state. Started over. The scandal had followed her, but people forget eventually. That's the nature of things. I didn't reply. I just archived the message and went back to living. Revenge, when done right, isn't loud. It's not slamming doors or screaming in courtrooms. It's calculated silence. It's letting people bury themselves in the graves they dig for others. It's walking away with your head high while theirs hangs low. And me? I walked away with everything that mattered. My name, my home, my dignity, and the peace of knowing that no matter how much they tried to destroy me, they underestimated the wrong man. And that was their biggest mistake.